What's going on, guys? It's Jacob from Topside MMA, and I'm bringing you guys a new series on the channel called Dog Watch, where I'm going to go over some of my favorite underdogs for the upcoming card and kind of explain some reasons why I think they might be a good option for you. And yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, we're going to have a couple different underdogs I'm going to talk about, and then towards the end, I'll talk about probably which one is my favorite out of the whole group, but I got a couple of them I want to break down for you guys, so let's get into the first one. We got Tresean Gore. Now, a couple reasons why I think he might be a good option this week is when you look at the stats, you can see Gore's takedown defense is solid. There have been 12 attempts that people have tried to land on him in the UFC, and he's only allowed 2 of those out of the 12 with the 83% takedown defense. That's pretty damn impressive, and I think that stat is important because we know a guy like Rodolfo Vieira, he wants to take it to the ground. He's a very high-level BJJ practitioner, and we know he wants to get there. And that's the thing, too. We know in Tresean Gore's fights, he hasn't had that many fights, in the UFC level, but at the same time, he faces 2.59 takedowns per 5 minutes in the UFC, which is insane. That means he's used to the takedowns. He's used to guys trying to take him down and control him because he has good power in his hands. That's why guys like to really get up in the clinch against him and control him. And the thing, though, is the second stat is Gore's control rate in the clinch, meaning when guys are up against the cage, when they're clinched up against each other, he wins 44% of the total control time that he is inside the UFC. So against a guy like Rodolfo Vieira, where he's really going to want to take it to the ground, he's going to want to clinch him up, he's going to want to land the takedowns, I think this is a decent stat that kind of stands out to me because if it's a 50-50 in the clinch, Rodolfo Vieira, he's really going to need to get it to the ground in order to have that success with his BJJ. And if you look at Vieira's clinch touch control stats, Vieira's takedown accuracy is only 27% at 17 out of 64 attempts total. We saw him struggle against Petroski, and when he wasn't able to land those takedowns, he was forced to strike the entire time. And he lost that fight. And I think the same thing happens with Tresean Gore. If he can't get those takedowns, that could be a problem. And this is another thing too with Vieira's stats. His control time per 15 minutes is only 5.09 minutes. So on average, he's able to control guys for about one total round when you average it across 15 minutes. So that means, if this does go a full 3 rounds, let's say Vieira is able to control Gore for one full round. Maybe he lands a takedown early on in the first round. And he's able to control it the entire time. On average, if he's only landing 5 minutes of control time per the entire fight, if there are 2 rounds that end up staying on the feet, I think Gore will probably be the better striker in this. So that does worry me a little bit about this fight, because Vieira obviously has the BJJ on lock. It's not a matter of the ground game and the submission abilities. He will definitely, clear as day, have the advantage over Gore. It's just a matter of if he can get it to the ground or not. So that does worry me a bit. That's why he's on the underdog list, because, there's a real possibility that he's not able to land the takedowns and he has to strike from distance, and Gore will probably look better there. We just saw against Petroski that he wasn't able to land takedowns. It didn't turn out good. So that's why Tresean Gore is an underdog on this week's Dog Watch. Next up, we got Nick Klein. Now, Nick Klein he's not as popular this week. I know a lot of people are really picking Pulev, but when you look at the stats, there are a lot of numbers that stick out to me. And first of all, as a bit of a pre-warning, they've both only had one fight in the UFC. So these numbers are skewed in the sense of it's a very small sample size. It's not some 10 plus fight sample size where you can really start to trust those statistics a little bit more. So that being said, if you look at their striking stats, though, they're not even close. Klein's landing 5.95 significant strikes per minute, whereas Pulev has only landed 1.2. And everyone's saying Pulev should be the much better striker, but we saw him get destroyed by CLD in his last fight. So yeah, Nick Klein isn't really known for his striking, but at the same time, Pulev hasn't proven that he's a good striker at all at the UFC level. If you look at their differential too, they're absolutely insane. It's their significant striking differential per minute. And we saw Nick Klein's is at plus 4.17 significant strikes per minute, whereas Pulev's is minus 4.35 significant strikes per second. And, these are only one fight in the UFC, but at the same time, if you look at the 2 fights, they're both against high level of competition. We have Mansour Abdul Malik and you have CLD. And honestly, that's what I was thinking. I was like, if Mansour and CLD fought each other, I would take Mansour, So I think that goes to show Klein's distance significant striking differential being that high actually does weigh more for me than the minus 4.35 in terms of like the comparisons between who they fought. And we saw with Nick Klein too in that fight, he won the first round too. So I know he did get finished. So obviously that is out there. That's like everyone knows that. But I don't know if Pulev is going to have that raw manpower to just run right through someone like Mansour does. And if you go and look at the control stats too, because in the CLD fight, there was a lot of times where we thought CLD was going to do more striking from distance because he had so much success, but he just wouldn't do it. He went to initiate the clinch. There were times where he rocked Pulev and then he would go and clinch with him. I don't really know why he was doing that. Maybe he was just taking the path of least resistance because he had a war with RoboCop before that fight. So maybe he was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take this one easy. I don't want to tax my body too much. But if you look at these control stats, we saw Klein's total ground control rate, or in the clinch/ground control rate, is 84%. That means when these guys are in the clinch, either whether it's on the ground or when they're tied up or standing on their feet and they're tied up on the feet, it's 84% of the time he is in control of those situations. Whereas Pulev is only in control of that 24% of the time. And especially where this fight is one where we think Nick Klein is probably going to implement more of a grappling heavy, wrestle heavy type of game plan. I don't think he's going to want to necessarily strike with Pulev because that's Pulev's best path to win. I think that's a big factor to consider. I think of any stat on this, that probably stands out to me the most, because if Nick Klein is winning 84% of their exchanges in the clinch, in the control time in that regard, I think it's going to be a big problem for Pulev. I do not see that turning out well for him if he's getting controlled nearly all of the fight. Anyway, next up in this fight too, we got Nick Klein's control time per 15 minutes. It's about the same stat. It's 5.39 minutes, whereas we have Pulev's control time per 15 minutes at 1.82. Should be minutes there at the bottom. Somewhere. Yeah, right there. Yeah, should be 1.82 minutes there at the bottom, but that just goes to show too. I know both of their fights didn't go, or at least Nick Klein's fight didn't go the full 15, but that stat is averaged across 15 minutes. So whatever it was per how many minutes it was, that first 5, the control time for that, it was multiplied out, if that makes sense. So obviously I know it didn't go the full 15, but if it were to be averaged across his time in that fight, he would be at 5.39 minutes of control time per 15 minutes in the octagon. So that just goes to show you, both of these stats, all of these stats really do have that flaw of the small sample size. So you can't really read a ton into these, obviously, but at the same time, all of these stats are so completely skewed, considering both guys took a loss. Like, across the board, all of the stats completely favor Nick Klein. So for him to be a slight underdog in this fight, I think all the value is probably on him. That's why I'm picking Nick Klein this week. I like him as an underdog spot. And yeah, I just want to show you guys these stats because they really stood out to me for this fight. Next up, for our next dog, we got Nora Cornell. Now, the first reason why I kind of found this stat, it was kind of interesting to me. If you look at both of their opponents' UFC win percentages and the girls that they have both lost to. So the girls that have beaten Nora Cornell, what do their UFC win records look like? And we saw from Nora Cornell, the only person to beat her was Cavalcanti, and she has a 100% win rate in the UFC. Whereas Rosa, the girls that have beaten her are 29-16 with a 64% win rate. Now, obviously, the amount of fights is different. Same thing, the sample size is smaller. But the thing that leads me to, I guess, like this stat, that kind of drew my eye to it, was the fact that we don't really know where Nora Cornell's potential could be. And yes, I know she's 35 years old, but at the same time, I kind of like leaning her in this example because we don't know where she's been able to be stopped or really had a hard time. Yes, we saw her struggle against Cavalcanti, but I don't know if Rosa would be able to beat Cavalcanti. So it's we don't really know how far her limit is. We don't know where her skill gap is. Yes, we've seen her be beat before, but at the same time, it's hard to see where she could go. We don't know where her ceiling is at quite yet. Whereas Rosa, we got a decent idea. There's so much tape on her, the amount of fights she's been in. There's a lot. We have more of a basis for understanding of her, is where she is as a fighter. So I think if there's any uncertainty, it's for Cornell. So it could be a good value play on her end. And the same if you look at their knockdown power too. Yes, it's a smaller amount of fights for Cornell versus Rosa, but we know that Cornell is probably going to have more power in the hands. Rosa's only had 2 knockdowns in 11 fights, where Cornell's had 1 in 4 fights. So the power level seems to be different. At least with Nora Cornell, the fewer fights that she's already had 1 out of 4 fights, whereas the 2 versus 11, it's a similar rate, but it leans a little bit more towards Cornell, especially she has never been knocked down herself, so it points to her durability being potentially slightly higher than Rosa's in this one. And if you look at their striking differential too, Rosa does have 2x the striking volume. As we can see, 6.2 significant strikes landed per minute versus 3.1 for Nora Cornell. But if you look at their differential, you can see, yeah, Rosa is landing more strikes, but she's getting hit just as much. So it doesn't really weigh a whole lot. As we can see, Cornell's significant strike differential is plus 1.38, where Rosa's is plus 1.16. So Cornell does have a slightly better significant striking differential, meaning if she's getting hit, if she's landing punches, yes, she's getting a lot that's coming back her way, but the volume doesn't really make a whole lot of difference in this example, considering their differential is so comparable. I don't see that high volume as being a real big problem here in this fight, especially because if anyone's going to be landing the bigger, more powerful shots, they probably would be Cornell. So even if her volume is slightly lower, if she's landing the heavier shots with more power that get more of an impact, that get more of a reaction, that could weigh a lot higher on the judges' scorecard. So I'm looking more at the differential in this one as opposed to the overall volume. But anyway, that does it for Nora Cornell. Now, next up, we got Neil Magny. This is the last one. This kind of surprised me the most because in the full breakdown video, I wasn't as high on Neil Magny. He's a decent dog, but I was a little bit more high on Dos Santos in my original full card breakdown. But after looking at the stats, I was a little bit kind of favoring, maybe, I don't know if I'm going to fully pick flip to Magny, but I'm like really starting to like him the more that I've dug into it. So, because the thing with both of these guys too is they've had a bunch of fights in the UFC, so these stats are actually very accurate and they're good. Like there's a lot that you can really pull from their stats when you break it down, compared to some of the other fights that we don't have a lot of stuff on them, like the Nick Klein and the Puliev fight. Like there's not as many fights, there's not as big of a sample size, so the data you can't have as much certainty that it's perfectly accurate. Whereas with this, it is, So in the clinch / ground control rate, Magny wins 41%, whereas Dos Santos wins 44%. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, like, Dos Santos is going to have his field day on the striking, he's going to have his time, but Magny is good in the clinch. That's where he wants to be. He wants to make it dirty. He wants to control you against the cage. And if both of these guys have about equal control rate in the clinch and on the ground, I don't know why it would be such a big or a crazy idea for Magny to win this fight just from hanging against the cage and controlling him like we've seen him, like he wants to do in a lot of his fights, And we saw too, the striking, everyone's saying Dos Santos is going to be the crazier, more like powerful, landing more volume. He's going to be the much better striker. It won't even be close. But the thing is, if you look at these guys' reach, Magny has a 7-inch reach advantage going into this fight. And if you look at the statistics behind this too, when fighters have a 6 to 8-inch reach advantage, they have a 60% plus win rate. So Neil Magny going into this as a plus 164 dog with such a big reach advantage, he likes to take it to the clinch. Both of these guys have a similar clinch and ground and control rate. I think this is going to be a lot closer than this line seems to suggest. And if you look at their striking stats too, they're pretty damn similar. The significant striking differential between Magny and Dos Santos, Magny actually has a higher rate than Dos Santos. Magny's is 0.95 and Dos Santos is 0.74. So, and if you look at their knockdown ratio, it's about the same too. It's not like Dos Santos is some super heavy power puncher that's knocking everyone out, as some people are kind of going into this fight with that perception, Both of these guys have only landed 2 knockdowns. And although Magny has had more fights, he's had 34 compared to Dos Santos' 17, I think this ratio is close enough to say, maybe Dos Santos isn't quite as dangerous as we were thinking he is coming into this fight. Maybe everyone's just really underestimating Magny because he's been finished in back-to-back fights, and it's like, well, he's getting finished by killers, though. So it's like, it's hard to really hate on his durability when he's going against guys that are just up-and-coming beasts. They're like feeding Magny to the wolves, So when you look at the stats, though, it's like 2-11 versus 2-7. It's not like Dos Santos is just going to come here and roll right through Magny with some huge, powerful shot. I don't see that. And if you look at the takedowns, too, a lot of people are saying, well, if Magny's best chance to win this fight is going to be, landing the clinch, going in the clinch, pressing him up against the cage, maybe landing a takedown. Magny's going for takedowns. Yeah, his accuracy isn't great, but at the same time, he's landing 59 out of 153. He's shooting for them. He's going for takedowns. He's trying. He has the experience. He knows when to go for him. He knows how to go for him. He doesn't always have the most success, but at the same time, it's a pretty damn good rate for someone like him now. And he's getting older, and he's been fighting absolute killers. He's had a super long career, so I'm not mad at his amount of volume. The same for Dos Santos, though, is he's only landed 10 out of 48. He doesn't shoot that many takedowns, and his accuracy isn't as good. So let's say this fight does start to get close. Let's say Magny does have some success on the feet because he has that 7-inch reach advantage. I don't think Dos Santos is going to necessarily be able to take Magny down. He hasn't shown his ability to do so in his previous fights. So when you really look at the stats here, I think Magny has a lot bigger of a chance here than the stats suggest. I think it's a lot bigger. Whereas I get why people are on Dos Santos, because Magny really just doesn't have the power in his hands to do a lot of damage and win big moments. He's definitely more of a minute winner. He's just winning slow minute by minute by minute. Whereas if anyone's going to land some huge shot, it's going to be Dos Santos most likely. And that would be the case of Magny versus just about anyone. Magny kind of beats people, just kind of weathering an early storm and taking them out later on, like we saw against what he did against Mike Malott, But yeah, when I look through these stats, these ones really stood out to me, and I'm like, damn, Magny really has a shot in this fight. He's a good dog, and especially Dos Santos, that's someone he can win against. They're not giving him another Carlos Prates. They're giving him someone like, all right, Magny, you have a chance here. So anyway, guys, that does it for this one. Hope you guys like this series. I'm bringing this new series to the channel. I just kind of came up with this idea. I like the name Dog Watch, trying to find you guys some good underdog spots, because sometimes I'll pick the favorites. I do pick a good amount of favorites, obviously, but I think there are sometimes where there's an underdog, I can see their method to win. Sometimes I don't think they'll necessarily get there. I'm not exactly sure Tresean Gore will be able to keep it on the feet, but at the same time, I think he's a good value underdog, because if he can keep it on the feet, he should win this fight. So I just wanted to put this video out there for you guys. I hope you guys like it. If you do like it, let me know in the comments so I can keep coming out with these videos every week, give you guys some more underdog lines, so the likes, the comments, all that, let me know what you guys think about this type of series. And yeah, I have another video coming up here tomorrow. I got more videos coming out this week, so make sure to stay tuned, stay subscribed. And thank you guys so much for all the support on recent videos. It's been absolutely insane. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.